It's time for my February wrap-up. Hi, my name is Jeanette, and I want to thank you for joining me on the channel Jane Reads. So today I'm going to talk about what I read in the second half of February. I've already posted a February mid-month wrap-up, so I will link that in the description below. So I'm only going to talk about the books that I read in the second half of the month. So this is from February 17th, 16th, because I finished a book on the 16th, which means I started a book on the 16th, to the 29th. Okay, so over the course of the whole month, I ended up reading 11 books. Not bad. I mean, I'm missing 3 days from January, like 3 last days than January, and I read a whole extra book. Awesome. I'm going to go talk about these books in the order that I finished them because that's the way they are recorded in my reading journal. So that's my notes I can refer to. It's just the easiest way for me to do that. So the first book I finished was Rules of Murder by Julianna. This is book 1 of the Drew Farthering mysteries. Every time I've looked at this book or this series, I keep in my head is Drew Farthington. And that is not correct. It is Drew Farthering Mysteries. So anyways, it is book 1 of the series. So we meet Drew Farthering and his friend Nate. Drew has inherited his estate from his father after his father passed away. Drew is probably in his mid-20s, I would say, when the book opens. And his mother and stepfather are living at the estate. Drew and his friend Nate, who is also the butlers of the estate, son. They have been away. They return home and discover that there is a party going on. Now, back in the days, party at the house meant everybody stayed at the estate for the weekend. So they arrive, and kind of the opening scene is kind of entertaining. There's somebody there that he does not get along with, and it makes for an entertaining situation. Then the party starts, and we discover that his stepfather has a niece from America, Madeline, who is visiting and with a couple friends. And Drew and Madeline kind of connect, and they're around the same age, and then Nate is trying to hit on one of the friends. And so it's kind of this group of young people with all the kind of older people involved in this party. So it's a very mix of ages. And during the party, they discover a dead body. But because of the condition of the body when they discover it, they're not 100% sure who it is. They think it's a certain person, but they're not 100% sure of that. So then the investigation opens. And the police do get called. They don't try to solve it on their own. The police get called in, but Drew and Nate decide, well, we're going to figure this out too. This happened on our property. We're going to figure this out. And Madeline comes along kind of to try to work with them and figure it out. I loved the interaction of the 3 young people and the way they worked together and kind of just the way they interacted with one another. I really enjoyed that. I did not care for a romance to bloom. There's a possibility of one, didn't care for it at all. It took away from the mystery and kind of what was going on. The one thing that I did not really enjoy or kind of made this a slow read for me was just trying to understand exactly what was happening and kind of what time period we're in. I know it was in the 30s sometime, but I don't know exactly when. And I only know that from the back description and from the car on the cover. Kind of gives it away. But I still don't really know exactly when it takes place. And I'm not 100% sure where in England it takes place either. And that could just be me missing something that was said. Very possible. But I really enjoyed kind of following along and trying to solve the mystery because not only the one body shows up, a couple other murders happen as well. So do they tie together? What is going on? I suspected a certain person, but I couldn't figure out why, like what the motive for it was. So I was very invested by the end of the story. It was like, okay, so that ties in with that, and I was very, very invested in it. So I did give this book 3 stars because it took me quite a while to get into, and because there was kind of the romance building up that I just didn't care about. But I do plan on continuing the series, and I have book 2 on my marches TBR. Then the next book I picked up was Bound by Duty by Valerie Hansen. This is a love-inspired suspense book. It is part of the Military K9 Unit series, but it doesn't tell me what number of the series it is. Anywhere in the book, it just says Military K9 Unit. It's like, okay. So I understood I could read this as a standalone. And when it first opens, I was very like sucked into the story and the action that was happening. It was like, what is going on? Like, what is going to happen? But then kind of a little bit more is revealed, and I'm like, wait, what? What? And then it was like, wait, I don't think this is a book 1. And I don't think this is a standalone. So then I looked it up on Goodreads, and it's like, oh, yeah, this Military K9 is a series. And I think this is book 2, I think, but I don't remember for sure what it said. And I was like, oh, and it does follow different characters than the other book in the series, but there's still like an ongoing storyline that happened in book 1 from what I gather. The way this is told, it was like, okay, there's definitely an ongoing storyline. So at the very back description said the first line is, her serial killer's brother escaped. And I was like, what? What does that mean? What? Her serial killer brothers escaped. So as I got into the story, okay, her half-brother has been arrested for being a serial killer, and he has escaped from jail. And the K9 unit is surveilling her to see if her brother, Boyd, will show up at her place looking for help, and will she aid them. And she is like, get off, like, stop surveilling me, stop watching me. I'm not going to help him. I will turn him into you if he comes to me. Like, you don't need to surveil me. And so she, Zoe, and Link, who is agent that's being assigned to surveil her, do not agree on things and have very different thoughts about it and kind of the situation of it. And Zoe has a young son that she's trying to protect. She is a single mother. And Link is part of the K9 unit, so he has a dog that's always with him and working with it. So the son and the dog kind of connect a little bit. And it's really interesting to see that side of it. But then, like, there's things that happen that I was just like, okay. Like, it just, so much of it felt unrealistic. And then the romance that develops between the two was like, yeah. Because they go from, like, pretty much hating each other or being suspicious of each other to, and I'm just like, yeah, no. I gave this book 2 stars because I just did not enjoy the relationship, the characters, like, it just, yeah. And because I felt like I was missing so much of Boyd's storyline and what. So, yeah. Okay, then the next book I finished was an audiobook that I was listening to, and that is Word of Honor by Terri Blackstock. This is book number 3 of the Newport 911 series, and this is a reread for me, but I did not really remember it. I just remember enjoying it. And, well, I enjoyed it. So at the beginning, there is a bombing at the local post office, and a little boy survives, and then lawyer Jill, who we have met in the previous books, is taken hostage by the guy that the police think did the bombing. So we are following the storyline of the little boy in the hospital and people trying to care for him. and we're watching that, and then we're following Jill as well in her situation that she's in. Now, the hostage guy, the kidnapper, hostage taker, wants Jill, when he finds out that Jill is a lawyer, wants her to represent him. And Jill's like, well, if I promise to represent you, will you let me go? But then once she's released, does she fulfill that promise? Like, I totally got like Jill's situation and what's the right thing to do and how does she respond to this. And then we're also following Jill's romance with Dan. So Jill and Dan were dating in book 2. They break up in book, like we see that in book 2, and now it's like, okay, what's going on? What caused the breakup? And will everything that's happened here kind of make them realize feelings, or will it bring them together, or will it just take them further apart? I did not like Dan at certain parts of this book. At other times, he was a great guy. And then other times, it's like, you're driving me insane. I don't like how you responded to that. I know you tried to rectify it, but I still don't like it. So I don't know how I feel about the relationship in the end. I went very up and down throughout most of the book. And then there is a whole section on covenants. Covenants between people. Covenants with God. Covenants mentioned in the Old Testament with Jonathan and David. And kind of like somebody's presenting this to Jill. And then Jill and Dan start looking into it, and like they turn to God's word and try to find answers for themselves rather than just taking this person, this person is telling them. I really enjoyed that. And it made me kind of look up some of this covenant stuff that was being referred to and how do I interpret it? And like, am I seeing what the author is having Jill see, right? Like, I found that very fascinating, very deep biblical faith talk. I really enjoyed that aspect. So I give this book 4 stars because I was really invested in the story and what was going on. There were a couple of things that happened was like, I don't know if the bad guy really would be able to do that. Like, it just felt kind of, I don't know. He had resources at his hand that it was like, really? Due to kind of the background that we know about him, I'm not sure if it was really realistic. And in the last chapter, the story does wrap up from like the bombing and Jill kind of situation and stuff. But then we gave a little brief glimpse of what's going to happen in book number 4. So we totally know who are going to be the main characters in book number 4. So I wouldn't say it ends on a cliffhanger because what's happening in book 4, which I've already started, doesn't happen in book 3, doesn't end in book 3. The ending of book 3 doesn't start that, but there are kind of little clues given that it's like, okay, they're going to be the main characters. And so yeah, so it's like, okay, we got to keep reading because now I want to know what happens to these characters. What I really enjoy about this series is each book follows different main characters, but all the other characters are in the background. It's a small town community. A lot of them work together. They have normal everyday interactions with each other. So I really enjoyed that. So we've seen the characters from books 1 and book 2 in this book, and they continue in book 4, which I really enjoy. Okay, then I read Turn to Me by Becky Wade on my Kindle. This is book number 3 of the Misty River series. So I completed a series. That's awesome. And so in this one, we are following Luke, who is part of the Miracle 5, who we've met from book 1. But Luke has been the one that has not been part of the Miracle 5 group. The other 4 have all kind of really hung out, become friends within the last, basically since the earthquake happened. But Luke kind of shut himself off from people, really backed away. He was a believer, and due to events, he is no longer a believer. But he had never planned on returning to Misty River. But due to a promise that he made to Finley's father, he has returned to Misty River to try to fulfill that promise, and then he plans on leaving. So he meets Finley. They don't have a pre-existing relationship, and Finley decides to take a chance on him. She hires him at her rescue shelter that she runs for animals, and she really tries to befriend him. And because of like kind of what she's experienced like in her own family with her father, kind of how Luke and her father meet to begin with and how the promise happens, was really intriguing. And I wanted to know like her story, her father's story, and what caused that. Like, because first she's talking about like, you know, she's talking about like the great, how she's had this wonderful relationship with her father, but then we know how Luke and her father have met, or where they met, and it was like, okay, what led to that? Like, so I was really intrigued in that. And then the mystery of the treasure hunt and trying to piece the different clues together. And they were like, they're not like, you know, you don't open an envelope and get a clue. Like, you really have to search and try to, are they deciphering the message correctly? Are they finding the right thing for the next? Like, I was really, really invested in that. I really enjoyed that. Again, the relationship, not a big fan, because Finley is a Christian and she's trying to witness to Luke and knows that Luke is not a Christian. But then she asks him if he would like a dating relationship with her. Yeah, no, that's not the way you bring somebody to Christ. And that's walking a dangerous path. So, yeah, I didn't really care for the relationship. There is a relationship that happens in the background that I would have loved to have more time with. I loved seeing the brief scenes that we did see of it happening and developing and kind of the way those two characters interacted. But I wish they were so much more of the focus of the book. Yeah. I did give this book 4 stars because I was really, really invested in the side character, because the side character we met way back in book 1, maybe. Well, we did meet them in book 1, yes, for sure. And kind of got to know them more in book 2. So I was really hoping they kind of had more of the story in book 3. So I was very invested in that character and what was going on with them. And the treasure hunt, because it was like, could I figure out the clues? What happened there? So, yeah, I really enjoyed that. And it completes the series for me. The next book I finished was The Captain's Daughter by Jennifer Delamere. This is book 1 of the London Beginnings series. And we meet Rosalind. We know from the prologue that Rosalind grew up in an orphanage with her 2 sisters, and she is now of age to leave the orphanage and go get a job. So then the book picks up 6 years later in chapter 1, and Rosalind is on the run. And she ends up in London, and due to circumstances that happen along the way and in London, she ends up alone on the streets, penniless. And she is outside this theater where she meets Jessie, and Jessie kind of befriends her and takes her in. And I loved Jessie. Loved her. And I really wish she had a much bigger part in the book, because I missed her. But Rosalind also meets Nate and his family, and Nate's sister Mary especially. Like, the rest of his family was great, but Mary was so entertaining. And the comments, and the family is trying to get Rosalind and Nate together, and just not happening the way they want it to happen. Because Nate thinks he's gonna leave England. He's not sticking around. He's only home to work for Patrick. And Patrick is his brother who has been injured. He worked at behind the scenes, like on the set crew or something, lighting crew, something like that. Stage crew, whatever it's called in the theater. But then he got injured, and so Nate is working his job to keep the job while Patrick heals so that Patrick can return to the job. And Nate has plans for his life, and he's not allowing a woman to get involved. He's been hurt by women before. Well, a woman before, and he's not allowing a woman to get involved in his life. But Nate's family has different ideas. And it was really interesting. Really, like, I loved watching the friendship bloom between Rosalind and Nate and kind of getting to know the rest of the family and the cast of characters with the theater. It was really entertaining. There were times that Rosalind felt a little bit naive due to the situation that kind of ended up, why she ended up in London. You'd think she would have been a little bit smarter than she was, or kind of perceptive about certain things. And there was a certain guy character that she shouldn't have trusted, and she did. And yeah. So I gave this book 3 stars because I did really enjoy the setting. And at the theater, they're putting on the play, the HMS Pinafore. And it was like, okay, now I want to watch that. Like, I need to know more about the story because now I know kind of a bit of the background and some of the songs from it. And it's like, I'd be really interested in seeing the stage production of it. Don't know if I ever will, but, you know. But there was times that it was like, I just don't care about this character that much. And the ending ruined this book for me. I just did not like the way it ended. I mean, the ending, well, I shouldn't say that. I liked the way it ended for the characters. I didn't like the lead up to the ending. But I do plan on continuing the series, and I know that is going to be one of the sisters of Rosalind in the next book. At least I'm pretty sure that's who it is. And I'm really interested to see, and I hope that we'll get these characters again because, I mean, if it's sister, Rosalind should be in it, right? So, we'll see. Okay, and the most recent book I finished, the book that I will end February with, is The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I read this for the book club, Christian book club with Krista from Books and Jams. I don't know what the actual name of the book club was. Now that I have no idea. But if it wasn't for that book club, I would have never finished this book. So we did 2 discussions, one for the first 15 chapters and then one discussion for the last half of the book, or the second half of the book. The first half of the book, I was getting into it really interested, like I could understand what was being said and what they were talking, like it's just, Screwtape is writing to his nephew, Wormwood, and it's, like demons, trying to prevent somebody from becoming Christian and believing. So, like, the enemy is God. Like, every time it refers to the enemy in the book, it's God they're referring to. And I really enjoyed the first half, and really, like, followed it easily. The second half of the book, wow. Like, if I wasn't reading it for the book club, I would have never finished the book. Because I was so confused. And just, like, the language of it, I really, really struggled with it. And I listened to an audiobook version of this while reading it and, like, following along on my Kindle. And it was still, like, I still don't really know some of it. Like, some of it I got, some of it is like, that's way over my head. But, yeah. So, but, I mean, it's a C.S. Lewis book that I finished. I would have never read it, but I finished it. Okay. Now, in February, I was also participating in the Once a Faebruary Readathon that was put on by Taylor at Tales and Treats with Tay, and Katie from Paperbacks and Ponytails, Celestria, The Writing Songbird, Cat Stories, and Christy A. Cole. Wow, a lot of people in that one. They had 12 prompts to complete. The only requirement is you must read one fairy tale retelling. Okay, I did that. I don't normally read fairy tales retellings. I couldn't tell you any other that I'd read. So when I first saw this readathon, it was like, oh, I don't know what I'd read for that. But when they said you only had to read one, I knew of one I had. And that was Fairest of Heart by Karen Whitmire. And I did read this one. And this one is definitely my favorite read of the month. But how many of the 12 prompts could I complete? And they had a little chart at the bottom that if you complete one prompt, you are a pixie. If you complete 7 prompts, you are a princess or a prince. And if you complete all 12 prompts, you are a fairy godmother or godfather. So, how many prompts was I able to complete? I was able to complete 9 prompts with a couple repeats of books, but not very many actually. I was able to fulfill more than I thought I could. Okay, so prompt number 1 was red on the cover, and I went with the captain's daughter because her dress is red. Prompt number 2 was an evil stepmother with a notorious villain. So for that one, I chose Fairest of the Heart. Then the prompt number 3 is a lesser known retelling. Nope, didn't read that one because the only retelling I read was this one, which is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and I wouldn't consider that a lesser known retelling. Then a girl with long hair, and for that one I put in Authentically Izzy because Izzy definitely has long hair there. Then we have a gendered flip retelling. Nope, didn't read that one because Snow White is a female in this one. Then we have a magical creature. Nope, didn't fulfill that one. Then animal integral to the plot, and I put in the Bound by Duty because we've got the canine dog. Then we've got Snow Queen on a quest, and I went with Turn to Me by Becky Wade because Finley is doing a treasure hunt and trying to complete. So for me, that's a quest. Then we've got a male main character, and I picked The Rules of Murder because Drew is a male main character. Then Last to Read, a book, and for that one, I went with Fairest of the Heart. But I mean, I could also do Authentically Izzy because I think most people have already read one of these 2 books. Then Musical Voice, a book that incorporates music or singing. And for that one, I had to put in The Captain's Daughter because there is singing and they're talking about the chorus line in the theater group. And for the last prompt is a short book. Again, I chose Bound by Duty because this is only 214 pages. So that is 9 prompts completed, which means I'm a princess. How fun. So that is my February. So I only have 1 book from my February TBR game that I did not read. I have started it. I mean, I think I'm only 30 pages in, but I started it. And that is The Summons by John Grisham. It's over by my chair. So yes, I want to say February was a pretty good reading month, and I'm hoping March goes the same way. But as I said, this was definitely my favorite read of the month, and I highly recommend reading it. It is historical, just so you're aware. But yeah, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video today, and I'd love it if you would leave in the comments below what was your favorite book of the month. And if I haven't read it, I will add it to my TBR. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.